Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Nothing But Nugs. It is good to be back with you on a Friday evening, back-to-back weeks for the first time in a while. Obviously, we had to get back on the schedule because it's playoff season now, and we are locked and loaded. And so we'll be bringing you that Nuggets coverage, high quality, hopefully, on a week-to-week basis. And we're excited to get going. But you might notice if you're watching this live, we've got a fun friend in here for the first time ever on Nothing But Nugs. He's got a few episodes of our new Broncos show, Broncos Zone, which you should totally check out, by the way, if you were unaware that we do that. Eric, welcome to the show, man. How's it going?
It's going good. Can't wait to talk some Nuggets. Longtime Nugget fan. First time I've had the opportunity to get to express my opinion on the Nuggets. So let's do this. I'm ready for it.
Heck yeah. I mean, it's obviously between you and me and everyone who's watching. It's definitely more fun to talk about a team that's in season right now than a team that's out of season. And especially when the team that's in season is the team that, a few experts think could win the whole thing. Despite the craziness that's going on this season. So yeah, it's good to have you in here, man. I say we just get right on into it because we have a ton of fun stuff to discuss today. Obviously, the Nuggets wrapped up the regular season last week, and it was quite an interesting regular season. Probably one of the most interesting regular seasons we've had in years, maybe since the championship season. But I guess we'll just start off with you, man. What do you think about this particular season? Were a lot of changes made, several new rotational elements, new head coach in his first full season as the head coach. Obviously, he had been an assistant on this team for years. But as you're looking back throughout the regular season, you're looking at the result. Third seed is where we ended up. Are there any interesting themes that you kind of just noted throughout the season that really stuck out to you and will forever be in your mind as the 2025-2026 Denver Nuggets season?
Yeah, for sure. I think it starts at the top, right? You mentioned overhaul with the coaching staff. Even though David Adelman was an assistant coach, he had to essentially bring in a whole new staff with him. That's all the assistant coaches. They're all new for the most part. So that's where it starts. And when you have, guys at the front like Jokic and Murray, the rest of the team is going to listen to those guys. Jokic, for basically his whole career, he's kind of been that silent leader, right? But you started to see him when they won the championship, you started to see him speak up a lot more. He talked a lot more on the bench. Jamal's kind of been that same way where, he leads by example. He plays his guts out on the court, and that's where he leaves everything. But this season, I think two big giant things that stood out to me was Jamal's game. He just became way more consistent. And that's ultimately, I feel like that's what got him an all-star nod. His ability to put together back-to-back games where he was scoring 25, 30 points a game. That's what this team needed. They needed another offensive outlet where they could consistently get, 20, 25 points from and to take that pressure off of Jokic. The second thing that I saw that stood out to me was, it's just such a bummer he's dealing with the hamstring injury, but it's Peyton Watson. Peyton Watson's transformation from a guy, you think back when he was drafted, when him and Christian Brown were rookies, and they got kind of sparse minutes here or there. Peyton Watson, you could see it on the defensive side of the ball. He could play with the big guys, but he wasn't an efficient scorer. His game over last summer coming into this year and then throughout this season, I feel like he's just exploded on the offensive end. He's a threat in the transition game. He's a threat from behind the arc. He can handle the ball. So there's not a whole lot of weaknesses. Those are the things that really jumped out to me. I think, we had some turnover where we traded MPJ. So getting Cam Johnson in at the start of the season, it was rough. And I think he'd probably be the first to admit it. He didn't get, come to a great start with the Nuggets. But over the last, I'd say, 25 games or so, Cam's picked it up significantly, especially in their, 12-game win streak to close the season. He was hitting big shots pretty much every game. So, the whole thing kind of really all is coming together pretty nicely. And then, of course, it's all led by the big fellow. The guy that you can just pretty much pencil in for a triple double every single night, which is ridiculous to think about from a center's position. But no, the Nuggets have a real opportunity. I think this season Jokic dealt with an injury for the first time in his career, a real injury where he had to miss significant games. And you saw, for what's the last 5 years, what's been the common theme is, oh, the Nuggets are great, but it's those non-Jokic minutes, right? That's been like a common phrase, those non-Jokic minutes. But this year, when he was out for those, I think it was 16, 18 games, something like that, they didn't miss a beat. They had a winning record in those games that he missed, and that was essentially a full month's worth of games that he missed. And to be able to hold the ship steady, and that's where I feel like Jamal just really picked up the slack and put the team on his back and said, I'm not going to let this team lose. So I've been super impressed. And David Adelman, I think he's another guy who just he probably doesn't get enough credit. It's kind of like Phil Jackson when he used to coach the Bulls and the Lakers. Everybody would say, oh, yeah, well, it's easy to win all those games when you have so much talent. But it's not easy to always wrangle in that talent. When you get a bunch of people whose, egos are big, and certainly NBA players can have big egos at times. They all want to shoot the ball. That's how they made it to the NBA. Those guys, they want the spotlight, and sometimes you have to teach them how to win as a team. And I think Adelman's done a really good job at teaching them how to win as a team this year. That's my 60,000 foot view of it.
And that's a good 60,000 foot view to have, man, because I completely agree with you. I mean, so you picked on 5 guys really there. You picked on Jamal, Peyton Watson, Cam Johnson, Joker, and Coach Adelman at the end. I completely agree. Like I just said, I mean, if I were to work, I guess, backwards to the first person you mentioned, I mean, Adelman's first full year, you got a league high in offensive rating. You got multiple stretches during this season where this was one of the best offensive teams of all time from a rating perspective. Just absolutely exceptional. And for a guy who kind of got thrown into a strange situation to begin his head coaching career at the end of last season, he really, really did take the opportunity on his shoulders this offseason. He put together his coaching staff. He contributed, presumably, to putting together a team that is now a very complete team from a depth perspective. That's really what killed him in the non-Jokic minutes, is not having not even just quality depth, but quality veteran depth too. Guys who have been around the block, who have had experience playing in tough games, playoff games occasionally, often for some guys, like Jonas Valanciunas. I think he was in the finals in 2019 with the Raptors, potentially.
Yep.
But that's a guy who's been around the league the last few years because he's such a valuable piece, always on trade blocks. And so to use all the new tools that he had at his disposal and create a team that is so incredibly offensively talented and put all those guys together in a way that has created a very formidable offense. It's just absolutely incredible, given the position he started in. You think about Joker as well, right? I mean, it's going to be a shame that he's not going to win his 4th MVP this year. Arguably, he should have won the last 6. Okay. But we just kind of take his greatness for granted. I mean, another year averaging over 25 points per game, led the league in rebounds and assists this year. And it's just incredible how easily he just slips under people's radars. And that's why it's so important this postseason. Now that the Nuggets have depth and health, presumably, aside from Peyton Watson, it's so important that they get him his 2nd championship this year. Because if they do that, they put him back on that national radar as a guy who is slipping under the voter fatigue accusations. Because, I mean, that's one of the number one reasons why people have kind of just dropped him off. They're like, oh, he's good in the regular season, but his team has only won a championship once in the period of time where he started to really dominate. And so they've got a great opportunity to really put it all together here and get him another championship. As far as Cam Johnson, look, we'll be honest, man, on this show, we've been kind of kicking Cam Johnson along here. Just kind of like, dude, all right. you really do have to adapt eventually to this offensive scheme. You know, you're a smart guy, you're a talented guy, you have playoff experience, finals experience, for crying out loud. You got to put it together, man. And so for us, we did not see this coming. We didn't really think he'd actually get back on track at any point this season. We kind of thought even at one point Peyton Watson might take his starting job. But man, has he really stepped up the last few weeks since fully being back in the rotation, recovering from his injury. And he's kind of just playing the role that they needed him to play, a guy who can knock down those threes on kickouts when they do that driving kick actions, a guy who can kind of play pretty solidly in the mid-range too. And obviously known for his defense aside from his three-point shooting. So it's good that he picked it up towards the end of the season here as well. I mean, as far as Jamal is concerned, it's good to see him get his first All-Star selection and a record year shooting three-pointers as well, leading franchise history now in terms of threes made in a season. So you're right, spot on with the consistency there as well. He really, now that he's healthy, he really did need to show that he can be a quality second guy in command with Nikola, considering this team has been built on the back of those two guys over the last 8-9 seasons. And so it was good to see him finally put that all together. And then you also mentioned Peyton Watson too. Completely unexpected from him, you know, entering his fourth season, I think in 2026, we were kind of like first round pick. He's got talent. He hasn't put it all together yet. And he finally did. My goodness. He was the third best player on this team for large stretches of this season. And that's saying a lot considering this team missed a crud ton of games with injury, several hundred games combined between all the players who missed time. And so that was just one of those things that really summarizes my overall takeaway, I think, from the season, which is that they kind of just got exactly what they needed to at every stage in the season to be able to put themselves in a position to succeed come postseason, which was really incredible from a coaching perspective, from a player personnel perspective, getting insane performances from Tim Hardaway Jr. off the bench, insane efficiency for a guy on a veteran minimum contract. Just absolutely incredible stuff to see. So yeah, all in all, I think this season is right about what we expected them to get anyway. I mean, I don't think people saw San Antonio putting up a 60-win season in 2026. Obviously, we expected OKC to be up there. But, I mean, we're not complaining that Denver ended up, despite all the injuries, despite all the newness, 4 new rotation players, and new coaching staff, et cetera, despite all that, they finished with a top 3 seed. And now we transition into our discussion about the T-Wolves. Here we go, man. Part 3. Part 3. The rivalry continues. And, I mean, you could probably ask a lot of different people in Nuggets Nation how they feel about playing the Timberwolves again. But yeah, man, let's just transition into that. Obviously, it'll be a tough series. This is not a 4 or 5 game series for sure. No. I think we'll get to this a little bit later on in depth, but I think this probably goes 7. But I'm curious, what do you think just overall T-Wolves Nuggets in the situation we're in? Break it down for us, man. How are you liking the Nuggets' chances?
Yeah, I think that the Nuggets, first off, I'll start out by saying I think the Nuggets can play with any team. I do think that the T-Wolves is a tough matchup for them. The T-Wolves were built specifically by the same guy who built the Nuggets. And he built them with the Nuggets in mind because I think they knew, Tim Connolly knew that, it was the Nuggets were that ascending team, and they were going to have to put something out there that could hang with them. I think that the T-Wolves are, they are a good team that is going to be a tough out from anybody. I agree with you. There's probably a lot of people in Denver who thought, in game number 82, when we saw San Antonio playing a lot of their starters, obviously they sat Wemby, but they played a lot of their starters through the majority of that fourth quarter. And a lot of people in Denver, I think, were kind of sitting back saying, hey, it might be okay if we lose this one. I like the matchup with Houston a little bit better than I like the matchup with the T-Wolves. But that's not the mentality of this Denver Nugget team. They've shown it all year. They're not going to be a team who wants to take the easy way. They go out there and they play the way they play. It doesn't change from game to game. And that's a tribute to the guys who they have on the team. When you talk about the new pieces, those veteran pieces that came in, the Bruce Browns and the Tim Hardaways of the world, do you think they picked Denver because they were like, no, it's cool. We'll go into the playoffs as a 4 seed and hopefully we'll win a couple of playoff games. No, they came here to win a championship. And that's what the goal is. And that's a realistic goal, I feel like, for the Nuggets. The T-Wolves match up really well. They hit open shots. They can play some defense. Rudy Gobert is, anytime you've got a guy who's won multiple defensive players of the year, that's going to be a matchup that, has the potential to where you're going to have to get the best out of Joker every single night. And usually we do see that. But some nights it might be a Jamal Murray, or it might be, a Christian Brown. The other night when he I think he went off for like 23 or 24 points, and he knocked down 4 or 5 big 3-pointers. We're going to need that. This is the kind of series though that, the old saying, a series doesn't really start until somebody wins on the other team's home court. That's kind of how I feel this series could go. This is a series where the Nuggets really need to protect home court. They fought hard all year to get that home court. And, it's playing in Denver is hard, but this year, for whatever reason, the Nuggets have had their struggles at home. And I think for the T-Wolves, they're coming in, kind of on a little bit of a lull. They're not playing their best basketball, but I think, you heard Anthony Edwards in one of his press conferences the other day talking about, this team we're just kind of playing out these final games. We're ready to get the playoffs started. They've been here. They've been to the playoffs. They've played the Nuggets. They're very familiar with each other. And I think it just sets up for a great series. You and I were talking, and I think this is probably the premier series in round 1 in the entire NBA. I think this one is going to have a lot of the focus that you're going to get from around the league. And I think rightfully so. I mean, you've got as you said, should be 6-time MVP, going up against Anthony Edwards, who, is certainly a younger face of the league who can just absolutely dominate games. So, and there's a little bit of that rivalry there. So there's that little bit of built-in, I won't call it hatred, but certainly dislike for one another. These teams, I'm sure there's a lot of respect out there, but there's a lot of not liking. A lot of those guys that line up from across from each other, they don't like each other. So that always adds a little bit extra to a series. And I know we'll talk about predictions, but I agree with you 100%. This is not going to be a short 4-game, 5-game series.
Yeah, for sure, man. I love everything you just said there. Look, they've had their fair share of tough battles, obviously, since we got knocked off on home court in the 2024 playoffs. That was just a tragedy of a game, blowing a 20-point lead in the second half. Absolutely tragic. Then the next season, the T-Wolves came out and swept us in the regular season, and thankfully we didn't have to play them in the first round last year. But this season, it was kind of different. It was a little bit different. Nuggets took 3 out of the 4 games they played against Minnesota in 2026. You can say what you want about some of those games, right? Like the fact that Anthony Edwards missed game 1 in Minnesota, or the fact that it took 55, 15, and 15 from Joker on Christmas night to knock them off in overtime, or the fact that we lost our last game against them on our home court after the trade deadline, after they picked up some more wing versatility with guys like Ayo Dosunmu. You can say whatever you want. It's going to be a tough series for Denver for sure. They, like you said, they've built a team that is built to specifically beat this Denver Nuggets team. Okay. They have their 3 bigs. All right. And they might actually be more suited to beat Denver this season after getting rid of Cat. Maybe not in some sense because Cat gave you that shooting, but in picking up Julius Randle instead, you just fortified your interior defense. And so it's Randle, it's Gobert, it's Naz Reid. Those are 3 guys who all bring very different aspects to that Timberwolves attempt to shut Nikola down. And so, I mean, this is going to be a battle between one of the better defenses in the league against the best offense in the league. And when it comes to winning in the postseason, you have to be able to win ugly games. The defense for the Nuggets has been a concern too, although I think I'm probably a little bit lighter on that aspect of criticism that other Nuggets fans are leveling against them. Because you think back to the championship team in 2023, they were 15th in the league in defensive rating, but you knew that they could step up and play defense when they needed to, which is all ultimately what mattered when it came down to actually locking down the 16 wins necessary for them to win the championship that year. And so I think I'll wait to see how the switching and the zone scheme that Adelman's team is currently running will work against Minnesota. Obviously, they won 3 of the 4 matchups this season, but it'll be very, very interesting to see how the Nuggets defense adapts in this series. I think that'll be a very, very key element of their ability to succeed against this Timberwolves team. As far as injuries are concerned, I think pretty much everyone besides Peyton Watson should be good to go. Maybe Spencer Jones will be out also, which is very unfortunate. You know, you would love to be able to put him out there for 5 to 10 minutes to just lock down Anthony Edwards and just go out there explicitly for that purpose for like 5 to 10 minutes. But he's got a hamstring strain. He'll probably be out for at least game 1, probably a few other games as well. As far as Anthony Edwards' health is concerned, he's really the only other healthy guy who's not healthy who should be able to be back for this series. But I mean, if you're the Timberwolves, again, if he's not his usual explosive self, that obviously gives the Nuggets a massive advantage. So the injury matchup will be very interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out at the end of the day. But I think I'm excited. I'm excited for this series. Obviously, game 1 is tomorrow. Are there any one-on-one matchups that you're looking at specifically as potential key matchups that we should be following in this series?
Well, I mean, obviously Joker, whoever he matches up with, I think it's an advantage. It's an advantage for the Nuggets. So kind of taking Joker out of it and looking at everybody else on the court, the wild card for the Nuggets is always Aaron Gordon. It's always, what are you going to get from Aaron Gordon? Is he going to be the defensive player? Is he going the defensive stopper? Is he going to be, asked to be the 3-point specialist that we saw against the Clippers? Is he going to be the guy who's, out there bringing the ball up the court when, the T-Wolves play that pressure defense against Jamal. They don't let him just dribble the ball up court most of the time without seeing a defender in his face. So they have to have somebody else bring that ball up the court. So who's that going to be? Is it going to be Aaron Gordon? Are we going to see a lot, Christian Brown, or is Jokic going to bring the ball up sometimes? One of the things that kind of has worried me as the season progressed is I know the Nuggets ended up, I think it was 3rd in the NBA with regards to the fewest amount of turnovers per game. I think they averaged just under 13 turnovers a game. But we saw some really high turnover numbers in the second half of the season post All-Star break. I think that is something to really keep an eye on. Is if the Nuggets turnover numbers start creeping up over 15, that's going to be a problem. Because they have to treat every possession. This is the playoffs. Every single possession becomes way more valuable. The possessions condense, right? So you don't get as many possessions as you get in the regular season. So the fewer turnovers that they can, the fewer turnovers that they can have or just limit, I think is really going to determine kind of the flow of the game. And ultimately, I think that will determine how the games play out. And I could say the other thing, going the other way for Minnesota, if they turn the ball over a lot, they're not going to be able to stop the number one offense, efficient offense in the league. I know they have a good defense. I know that's kind of what they build their team around is their ability to stop and slow people down. And a lot of that starts with their guard play. They're extremely quick. They play that pressure defense. But But ultimately, I think that's, to me, that's the game inside the game, is watching those turnovers. If you start to see that turnover number for either team get above 15, I think it's a good sign for the other team.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, it's hard to disagree with that. I mean, you're going to have to, like we kind of said earlier, you're going to have to step up defensively. Both teams are going to have to. Probably will be a little bit easier for Minnesota because of their personnel and because that's a central aspect of their identity, with Gobert in the middle and then a bunch of other guys running around as different aspects of the perimeter and the mid range, making sure that, you have to take some tough shots. It'll be interesting to see who does win that turnover battle. Obviously, the Nuggets have that offensive set that should give them the ability to create looks, especially when the doubles on Joker come. As soon as Joker gets double teamed, fundamentally, that they're going to cause issues for the Nuggets in the paint. They're going to try to take away cuts. They're going to try to take away Joker's ability to operate inside. And so that will create a lot of good looks for guys like Tim Hardaway Jr., maybe even a Julian Strawther if he gets any rotational minutes. We'll see with both Spencer and Peyton Watson being out and with how well he played the last few weeks of the season. You're going to get some pretty good looks from three on the perimeter. And so I think, again, to work backwards to forwards with what we're talking about here, I think an interesting tactical aspect that we'll need to watch this series is how the Nuggets are shooting their threes. This has kind of been something that we've been tracking throughout the season. They're a high percentage team. They're a lower volume team. And so I might expect the volume to go up a tad bit, especially if some of those back cuts are not getting through the way they'd like. And so it's really going to come down to, can the Nuggets shoot a little bit higher volume threes at a very similar upper 30s, lower 40s clip? Because if they're not able to do that, that Minnesota is going to get those rebounds. They're going to run. They're going to try to get Anthony Edwards in transition. And, after they try to score on that end, assuming they do, they're going to want to get the Nuggets in a half court set. They don't want the Nuggets to be running them back and forth at altitude or even in Minnesota. They want to control the game because they know that on paper, they're the better defensive team. They're the bigger team, the longer team, a more athletic defensively team. And so it'll be very interesting to see how the Nuggets approach that and attack that with maybe a slightly higher pace, generating some good looks, trying to get to the free throw line, get guys like Gobert in foul trouble and all that. So it'll be very interesting to see how the Nuggets balance that 3-point game with the presumed challenges they'll have at scoring inside. But again, Alaman is an offensive genius. They've had one of the better offensive seasons of all time this season. Super efficient. Maybe he'll be able to scheme up some ways to get those back cuts, even when Chris Finch tries to make some adjustments to take those away. As far as an individual matchup that I'm looking at, I think the Jamal Murray, Jaden McDaniels matchup is a very interesting one. Not that Jaden is, it's Jaden, right? It's not Jalen McDaniels, is it?
I think it's Jaden.
Yeah. It is Jaden. Yeah. It's not that Jaden will be guarding him primarily on defense, but he'll probably be a hover guy around there, watching Jamal off those pick and roll actions. And he's definitely got the versatility to be able to guard not only forwards, but also guards. And so he's really, really good. He's been one of the better all-around defenders, especially at the small forward position in the league over the last few seasons. And so you probably have Dante DiVincenzo on Jamal initially as the primary defender, but it'll be very interesting to see how McDaniels rotates onto Jamal, giving him some tough contests, especially with those mid-ranges. But yeah, man, I mean, it'll be very interesting to see how all of this plays out. Any other thoughts about this series? Anything else just in general that stands out to you or that you think might be an interesting thing to watch?
Yeah, the bench. You touched on it earlier. This is the first time where the Nuggets, I feel like, have come in with a team that's 10 guys deep. You're not losing. We talked about the non-Jokic minutes. That was always a huge thing. And don't get me wrong, I think we do still see a dip when Jokic comes off the court. But it's not as drastic as it once was, I don't feel. We have a solid bench. Strawther has been playing amazing over the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks. His ability to kind of be able to hit shots while moving, especially three-point shots. That's going to be a thing. I think that's going to be it could be a thorn in the side for Minnesota. On the flip side, Minnesota does have they do have a pretty solid bench. We all in Denver are familiar with Bones Highland. I know Bones is going to come in to this series kind of with a chip on his shoulder, like he always does anytime he plays the Nuggets. But um, they run the ball up and down the court a lot on with their second team, and I think that's something that we have to be careful for with, because sometimes we have those lapses where we can go into a 4 to 5 minute span where we don't score or we just aren't hitting our open shots. If we're not hitting shots, we got to rebound. And that's difficult against a team with the size of Minnesota. They're a big team and they have the ability to rebound the ball pretty well. So to me, I think the bench is, one way or the other, whether that's for Minnesota or for Denver. I think the bench is definitely, something to point to with this series and say, hey, that could be something that separates one team from the other.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you brought that up actually, because it'll also factor into some of the things that Adam has been messing around with over the last few weeks, a lot more, a little bit earlier in the season as well. But it's that small ball lineup. And
Yeah.
so when we bring up the fact that Minnesota is a larger team, it'll be interesting to see if or whether at all he decides to go to that small ball lineup at any point during the game. I know he's likes to close out games with it over the last few games, at points during the winning streak, especially. But I mean, well, I guess I'll ask you, do you think the small ball lineup is something that they'd be able to effectively attack a bigger Minnesota team with?
Yeah, I think that's kind of been the experiment, right? That's what Alderman's been trying to play around with, is to find the pieces that fit, that he can have confidence in putting out on the court against a team in a playoff series. I think he's tinkered with it enough to where he's found a comfort level with certain players, and whether I never want to look back at certain things, and certainly don't want to talk negatively about Mike Malone, because Mike Malone ultimately brought a championship to Denver. But I don't think that some of the guys that are getting looks under Adelman would have gotten those same looks under Mike Malone. He just didn't seem to have that leash where he would let people off, and he wouldn't let Strother go out there and take 12 shots a game. Whereas if Strother's hitting shots, I think Adelman is okay with him taking 12 shots a game if he's going to put him in the basket. Um, but yeah, I do think that the Nuggets have the ability to use that small ball lineup. And the key factor, though, is going to be, if they do, how quickly can they adjust if they aren't hitting their shots? Because that's the key with that small ball lineup, is they've got to make their shots. I know it sounds simple. It's the NBA, put the ball in the basket and you're going to win most games, but it's not simple when it's a playoff series and things are tighter on the court. And sometimes these the lights are bright, and sometimes you get guys who don't necessarily like those bright lights. And I think it'll be interesting to see, but I do think that the Nuggets have the ability to put a smaller lineup out on the court and still be able to compete. And we'll see, because I think you're going to see it in the starting tomorrow.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, we will definitely see for sure. Hopefully, it is effective. I mean, obviously, but like you said, they have to knock their shots down. And I mean, as great as Julian Strawther has been the last few weeks, as great as he was in Game 6 last year against the Thunder when we needed him to be from outside, uh, you obviously do have that reservation in the back of your mind. If with all the hype and all the bright lights and all the pressure that comes with the playoffs, especially against a rival who you have competed with in 2 of the last 4 postseasons, if that pressure is going to get to some of those younger guys in the depth, in such a way that it impacts their ability to knock down those shots, obviously. But I mean, the small ball lineup, I think it is. I agree with you. I think it is a good way to go after this Minnesota team in clutch time. Not necessarily sure about it. Obviously, if the game is close down the stretch and defense matters, probably not going to want to have a small team in there. but I guess it depends on what side of the score you find yourself. Are you up by 5 or 7 points with 4 minutes left in the game, or are you on the flip side of that? So all of that stuff is going to be very interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see how Adelman runs that, how all the switching actions on defense might work when that small ball team is out there, how effective that'll be, etc. Another interesting lineup thing that I wanted to ask you about is the double bigs lineup. Joker and Big Val. Do you think that there's a world where we see both of them on the court at the same time for meaningful stretches of the game?
As much as I would love to see it, because I think that's something that we didn't tinker with very much. We saw it a handful of times. The problem is, and again, when you start looking at holes in what the Nuggets do well and the holes that they don't do well, when you have Val and Joker on the court at the same time, your perimeter defense is going to start to lag. They neither of those guys are great in one-on-one coverage type of situations. So you would assume one of them would be covering Gobert. So probably not a lot to have to worry about out on the perimeter with Gobert. But that means one of the other ones, whether it's Joker or Val, they're going to have to be playing defense on somebody who's probably a three-point shooter or somebody who can, handle the ball. And that's, to me, that's not putting them in their best position. I don't feel like that sets us up. Now, on the flip side, offensively, I think it creates a ton of matchups. I think it creates a ton of problems for Minnesota. But ultimately, it slows the team down. I think one of the things that the Nuggets want to play to, especially at home with the altitude, is you want to play that higher pace game. You want the other team breathing heavily in the third and fourth quarter. When you put Joker and Val on the court at the same time, I don't think you get that. You're not, you might get it from a physicality standpoint because they're big bodies, but I don't think you're going to see them running up and down the court if they're on the court at the same time for meaningful minutes. It would have to be small spurts, and I think that would probably be the most you would see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you also have Aaron Gordon out there, right? He's flexible enough to guard whether it be Naz Reid. He'll probably be on Julius Randle, you figure most of the time. And so, yeah, you do get that flexibility with him, even though he's kind of been he's missed a lot of games this season with that hamstring. I think he's probably going to be ready to go, and I think he should be able to deal with a lot of the issues that you might consider putting the double big lineup out there for. So, but I mean, you never know, right? It'd be very interesting to see that get thrown out there. I don't think Minnesota has put all three of Reed, Randall, and Gobert on the court very much this season, if at all. So it's not like you'd have to put Gordon, Joker, and Big Val out there on the court at the same time. But it'll be very interesting to see how the bigs are managed. I can't imagine we see much, if any, of Zeke Naji in this series. As far as that's concerned, we're definitely going to have to deal. It's going to have to be a deal where the small ball team takes over in those situations. You don't want to have to rely on the double big lineup or just an overly big lineup in general, because you just lose so much of the schemes and the abilities that make this offense what it was this season. So
yeah. I do. I am interested to see how the whistle will play out. Because I do think Minnesota plays really physical. They want to be hands-on. That's kind of their defensive setup, is they want their hands on their guys when they're playing defense. And, when it comes to Joker, I've felt like for the last, 5-6 years, he probably had, I know it's gotten better at some stretches, but he probably gets one of the worst whistles in the NBA. I know it doesn't always pan out that way with his free throw statistics, but when push comes to shove, I feel like that guy handles the ball so much. He touches the ball darn near every possession. And he's always got guys, leaning on him, pushing on his, sometimes you saw it with Lou Dort, attacking his knees. Those are the kinds of things that over a 6-7 game series, you can start to see frustration if things aren't going well for Jokic. So very interested in seeing how the whistle plays out. You've got two very smart head coaches who are going to push the buttons that they can push to see exactly what they can get away with and what they can't get away with. And I do think we've seen, for the most part, Joker's able to keep his composure, but we've seen those stretches where it's like he gets extremely frustrated, and when that happens, that's when the other team kind of gets an edge. When they're in Joker's head, I just don't feel like he plays his best. Now, it's that fine line though, because you could sometimes you don't want to play against an angry Joker as well. He definitely has that ability to flip a switch and, like you said, put up 55 and 15. So it's a fine line, and Minnesota's been on the opposite end of that multiple times.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that is another interesting aspect I hadn't necessarily thought of, but I mean, you hope that with all the physicality that comes with postseason basketball, even though, I mean, by default, that means that they let a lot more stuff go. You do hope that Joker does get his fouls called reasonably, the fouls on him at least, and that he's getting to the line in a very proportional way to what you might expect him to get in a series like this. Because, I mean, if for whatever reason, let's say the 3-point shots are not going down on any given evening, they're going to have to get to the line and they're going to have to take advantage of scoring points another way. They're just going to have to attack that defense. And so if you're not getting rewarded for being aggressive and getting downhill, like Joker likes to do, it can be a very, very interesting aspect of some of these games. It might even turn a game or two in this series. So very important aspect that you just noted there as well. I say at this point, we shift into the final segment of our podcast episode here tonight, and that is first round series predictions. Just for our series, not the whole league. But I kind of want to just walk through game by game, however long you think this game is going to go. Kind of give us your general prediction of how you think each game will go, who's going to win, general score prediction for each game, or any other important things that you think might happen that might sway the game in the direction that you're thinking. So, if you want to kick us off, sir, go right ahead.
Sure.
Walk us through the first round. Nuggets-Timberwolves.
I'll start. So just with game one, I think there's a lot that rides on game one. It's kind of how you set the tone for the entire series. I was lucky enough to go to one of the Nuggets-T-Wolves games a couple years back, and the atmosphere in Ball Arena is going to be electric. We already know that. Denver home crowd brings it when they play at home for sure. So I do expect the Nuggets to handle business in game one. I don't think though you're going to see, what the Nuggets average this year, 122, 123 points, something like that. I don't think you're going to see games in the 120s. It just doesn't usually happen in the playoffs. So I would tend to say somewhere closer to the 105 to 110 range for the Nuggets. And if everything goes right and the Nuggets defense is able to do what we know that they can do, hopefully the T-Wolves are finishing somewhere around 100. Scott Hastings always used to like to talk about, the first team to 100 usually wins. And that's kind of how I look at this series. The first team to 100, I think, is probably going to be the team that wins the majority of the games. I know I mentioned it a little bit earlier. I think that this could really be a series where the series doesn't technically start until you see somebody win on the other team's home court. I don't think that this is going to be a short series. I do think that the Timberwolves, whether it's going to be game 2 or not, I don't know, but I do think the Timberwolves will win one game in Denver, and I think that the Nuggets will return the favor and win one game in Minnesota. I think that this series will go 6. I think it's going to be one of those series where you're not going to see any game be a blowout. You're going to see most of the games, I feel like, are probably going to be within 5 to 8 points. And you're certainly going to see, a lot of meaningful fourth quarter minutes. I think that's kind of how I would project this series. Hopefully you're going to see a lot of Jamal Murray and Jokic pick and rolls, because that's where the bread and butter is made in the fourth quarter with the Nuggets, and then letting Joker either finish at the rim or find the open person that he's done all season long. And, I think that's kind of how this series is going to go.
Yeah, solid. So Nuggets in 6. That is the prediction.
That's what I think.
Nice. Love it, man. And I certainly would be right there with you, Nuggets in 6, which is why I'm going to have to say Nuggets in 7, because every time I say 6, there's always that one game where they kind of tune out. And it's like, well, you could have won it in 6, but now you're going to have to win it in 7. So, yes, Nuggets in 7 for me. And I think this is kind of how it'll go, how the series will shake out. Just to recap how the regular season went, Nuggets won game 1 in Minnesota, 127-114. They won the second game at Minnesota, 123-112. They lost to Denver on Christmas evening, 142-138 in overtime. I think that game went to overtime around the upper teens, lower 20s, perhaps. And then the most recent game they played in March, the Timberwolves won in Denver, 117-108. So this is what we're working with. In game 1 tomorrow, it's a day game, kind of funky timing. I think the Nuggets will win game 1. Even though the last game that was played was here with the new look Timberwolves team, I don't see the Nuggets shooting 27% from 3 again like they did in that game. And so I think they'll pull it out, probably something like 119-112 or something like it. Game 2, obviously here in Denver again. I agree with you. I think the Timberwolves probably do get a game in Denver, which is kind of annoying, but it kind of just is the case. And so for me, it's kind of a question of, is it game 2 or game 5? I think it's probably more likely that the Nuggets tune out a little bit in game 2 and they need to lock in. And I think the Timberwolves win game 2 probably by a score very similar, right? Somewhere in the upper 110s to lower 110s, maybe upper 108s for Denver. Then they go to Minnesota, obviously. I think the Nuggets probably lose game 3, the first game in Minnesota, probably by a similar score. Like you said, I think these games are going to be pretty close, pretty competitive. I don't see any blowouts happening this time around. But then I think the Nuggets bounce back in game 4. I think they win a close game in game 4, a game that is probably within 5 points in Minnesota in that game 4. Then they come back home. They win game 5, all right, here in Denver, keep the momentum up. Then they got that closeout game, 3-2. That's that game I'm talking about. It's that game 6 where it's like, if you wanted to win here on the opponent's court, you could, but they're not going to. I think they're going to lose game 6 in Minnesota, pretty close again. You might see another game where you get a little bit lower scoring. So maybe something like an 8 to 9 point win for Minnesota, with the high being like 110 in points scored. Then they come back home to Denver, and Denver locks it down. It'll be another close game. I think it might be a little bit higher scoring, back to the upper teens, maybe even lower 120s. For whatever reason, one of those games always slips in there in the last year or two, because usually you're right. Like that's the perspective I adapt, that there really aren't many high scoring games in the postseason. But for whatever reason, the Nuggets find themselves in at least one of those the last few years, and so I think this is the game that happens. I think that they win game 7 on home court, and they advance to the second round to take on probably the San Antonio Spurs. Although I think the Trailblazers will give them more trouble in the first round than people think. I don't think they're going to win. I don't think the Trailblazers will beat the Spurs, but it'll be a close series. And then you get your Spurs Nuggets second round series. But that's my prediction. That's how I think this is going to break out. And I'm excited to see another hard fought series between these two teams. Hopefully they don't stress us out too much while we're sitting on the couch eating snacks. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Those are
Chris,
my
do you think that you think the Nuggets still have a bad taste in their mouth from last year? I mean, up 20, game 7. That was kind of my thought, as why I feel like they're going to lock in on game 6, because I agree with you. I can see that's how that normally plays out. You get a team going back to their home court on game 6, letting we've got our backs against the wall and we're going to win this game. And I feel like, to me, the Nuggets have been there, and they say this year, we're not going to let you get that game 7. get that opportunity to come back to Denver and put that 20-point loss on us again. That was kind of my thoughts around, why this year is going to be different.
And there's a compelling case to make for that, because it also felt like this season they were a better, more competitive road team than they were in previous seasons. Didn't they? They had like a 9 or 10 game win streak on the road earlier on in the season too, didn't they? So they clearly have the confidence to go and win on the road. I think there was a period of time even where they were playing better on the road than they were at home. So I could totally see that happening in a game 6. You just don't want to deal with Ant-Man under pressure. That's just the thing I hate, because it's like he's just going to step up. He's going to make himself responsible for carrying his team through to the next round. And so it's like, again, the health element does play in there, but I mean, even if he's fully healthy, I could totally see what you're saying. It'll be very interesting to see how that game 6 goes. Hopefully the Nuggets can lock it down in game 6 for the first time in forever on the road against a tough team like the T-Wolves, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. We will have to wait and see.
Only That's time why they play the games.
Yeah, absolutely. Best believe. That's what those are there for. Any other thoughts as we close today's episode?
No, I'm super excited. I do wish, and I know that we're going to see some more primetime games. I kind of wish that the Nuggets got that primetime slot on Saturday versus the 1:30 in the afternoon. I know it's 3:30 Eastern, but for whatever reason, looking back over the years, I don't know the exact statistic, but I would be willing to bet that the Nuggets just don't have that great of a record when it comes to day games. That's just a gut feeling I have. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but that's the only thing that concerns me with game 1 is I don't like the timing of it.
Let's find out. I'm actually curious now. Hold on a second. Denver Nuggets. I got Denver Nuggets record in day games in the last 2 years. Let's see what that ends up being. I'm kind of curious because I kind of feel the same way about that. I remember even back in 2018, they were in the second round against the Blazers, and game 7 was here. Obviously, they were an inexperienced team at that point, so that factored in. But day game 7, national television against the Trailblazers in the second round, and they lost. I was like, that day game aspect, kind of funky, might have factored in. Let's see here. Oh, they didn't pull it up. I can't see any reliable data about that. But anyway, yeah, I would wager, if I was a betting man, that's probably the case. They do not like to play during the day, at least compared to night. That's what it felt like. So I guess we'll see about that too. They do get that primetime game, I think, next Saturday for game 4. So, I mean, it's in Minnesota. You'd love to have it here, but oh well. We'll see. We'll see how it goes, man.
Yeah, and maybe I'm way off. I'm just looking at this. I did pull it up. Games that start before 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. This season they're 7-3. The previous season they're 6-2. So they're 13-5 over the last 2 seasons. That surprises me. I'm going to be honest with you. I would have guessed that number was way worse than that. So who knows? I guess maybe things are looking up if 13-5 is their day game record. Maybe that's a good sign.
Yeah, and maybe so. It would be interesting to see what the differentials in those games are. If they're closer games, they're more competitive. But yeah, I guess we'll find out. I mean, personally, I like watching primetime games more than the day games. So
Same.
I mean, for that reason, it's kind of just disappointing that they're playing during the day. But oh well, beggars can't be choosers. And I think ultimately just winning the game is more important. So I think if they do that tomorrow, we'll all be happy. But thank you, man, for an amazing conversation. It was good to have you on the show. Hopefully you can hop back on with me next week. Yeah. As we walk through, I guess, what will have been 3 games in this series at that point. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that conversation next week, should it be. Thank you to everyone who watched today's episode as well. If you haven't already, subscribe here to Nothing But Nugs, to NBN. Go check out our other channels here on Elevated Pulse Sports, our Rockies content, our Broncos content, our Avs content that just got launched this week. That's a good team. You should go check them out and give them some love. But until then, hopefully you share this episode and this content with other people if you enjoyed it. And we will be right back here next Friday evening. Till then, take care and go Nugs.
Go Nugs.